So hello and good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for joining us on our final Preparing to Open webinar series, which for those of you that have been participating in this, you will note that this is the fifth one in our series of 5. We have covered on a number of issues that businesses will have to deal with as we all prepare to open our offices, open our facilities over the next several weeks and months. And so as a reminder, we focused initially on the subject of liability, and then we shifted gears and went into facilities management. And then from there, we turned our attention to behavioral and mental health. And then the last 2, we've really started to focus on education. So we had a broader conversation of education, both from a K through 12 and a higher ed standpoint. And now we're going into an early learning environment, and particularly talking about childcare. And that is a huge topic for us. And so we're going to really get ready to jump right in. But first, I want to thank our panelists for joining us. I think we've got a great group assembled. In addition, I also want to recognize and acknowledge our 2020 annual partners who you see on the screen behind me, who without their support, truly many of our initiatives would not be possible this year. And so again, thank you to our annual partners. And so with that, I am now going to introduce our panelists. And so first is, and I'm just going to go alphabetical. We have Tracy Brocolino, and Tracy is the Director of Early Childhood Education for the Community Action Council of Howard County. She leads CAC's Early Childhood Education Program, which serves 322 3 to 5-year-old students across Howard County. She has over 26 years of experience in education as a classroom teacher, reading specialist, early childhood curriculum researcher and developer, and as the National Director of Special Education Services, serving 35 public K through 12 charter schools across the nation. She has led teams of educators through curriculum implementation, litigation support, professional development, and compliance monitoring. So again, Tracy Brocolino from Community Action Council.
Good afternoon.
Next, we have Bita Dayhoff, who is the president of the Community Action Council of Howard County, a $15 million nonprofit organization based in Columbia. And under her leadership, CAC has grown into an award-winning agency with financial growth of over 200%. This growth has enabled CAC to expand its services that help improve the quality of life for low-income families. Bita is a strategic thinker, relationship builder, collaborative decision maker who inspires and motivates those around her to give 100% towards their beliefs and values. She serves on the board to promote self-sufficiency, the local Children's Board of Maryland, Hunger Solutions, the BGE Advisory Council, and the Maryland Community Action Council, the Maryland Community Action Partnership. She's a graduate of the University of Maryland and holds a Bachelor of Science degree in accounting and an MBA in finance. She is also a graduate of Leadership Maryland and Leadership Howard County. And so again, thank you, Bita Dayhoff.
Hi, everybody. Thank you.
Next is Richard Huffman. And Richard is the CEO and founder of Celebree Schools, which he founded in 1994, growing the brand from a single preschool in Ellicott City to 26 locations across Maryland and Delaware today. Richard takes an active role in mentoring new franchisees, providing them with the guidance, tools, and resources they need to succeed with a Celebree School franchise. He boasts years of mentoring experience through Vistage International, an organization that offers one-on-one coaching by established business leaders to up-and-coming entrepreneurs and executives. In his work with Celebree School franchise owners, he shares more than 20 years of industry experience and entrepreneurial expertise. He offers direct support to franchisees as they develop their locations while challenging assumptions that could impede their business. He is committed to the success of every franchisee and is available on a daily basis for one-on-one support. And again, it's my pleasure to welcome Richard Huffman.
Thank you.
And last, but certainly not least, is Nette Stokes. And Nette is the Executive Director and Childcare and Healthcare Advocate for Just Living Advocacy. where she is working to improve and enrich the lives of families towards long-term self-sustainment through affordable childcare, healthcare access referrals for uninsured, and provide wellness information, especially in the areas of heart disease in women. For nearly 30 years under the radar, she provided job opportunities in human services to many women during her professional working career in corporate, government, and nonprofit industries. She working 15 years for IBM in the areas from manufacturing, engineering, development to corporate financial contracts. She brought about a successful operational track record from a variety of disciplines and instilling a sense of ownership among team members. Her background in corporate management provides a solid grounding in financial planning and controls. She's also worked in 10 years in the government at the U.S. Department of State and the Department of Justice as a senior program and project manager. While there, she increased revenues over $15 million in 4 years through strategic business development and marketing, which this background has provided her with disciplines to manage and govern fiscally. And she's also performed similar work in other corporations and nonprofits. And so again, we welcome Nette Stokes as well.
Hello, everybody.
So to set the stage for today, I'm going to just start out, and we're going to ask one question to all of you, and then at various times I'll ask just individualized questions. But as employees try to meet their new work and family obligations during COVID-19, the loss of childcare options and school closures present a parallel crisis. Working parents and their employers now find themselves in an ever-changing work and care landscape that can be increasingly tricky to navigate. Employers who are urgently addressing the care needs of their employees during this emergency, especially those in the lower income settings, can achieve business sustainability, productivity, and profitability in the long run if we're able to address this childcare conundrum. So if a relatively large share of providers close and move away from the childcare sector, then the economy ultimately could find itself with inadequate supply as it tries to rebuild, especially if the economy bounces back relatively quickly. And so just before the COVID-19 pandemic arrived, there was concern amongst businesses becoming more vocal about the shortage of supply of childcare and how it was impacting their ability to hire and retain employees. So again, as we really kind of close this 5-part series, I think we can certainly see that childcare is going to be a huge area that we have to have conversations and continue to have conversations on. So I'm going to start out with Tracy. And so yesterday, Governor Hogan made an announcement, an encouraging announcement concerning daycares and summer camps amongst his comments on restaurants as well. And so share just in your opinion, and actually I'm going to ask all of you to share what this announcement means for your business or organizations and the customers you serve. And so we'll start with Tracy, followed by Richard, then Bita, then Nette.
Sure, thank you. We were all waiting with bated breath as Governor Hogan spoke yesterday. I had my children gathered around the TV. I said, this could change our lives going forward. And we were expecting him to say that phase 2 would begin. He did not say that. However, he did give us a wink and a nod that get ready because it's coming. And for our families that we serve, our service is critical, as is all childcare, of course. But our families are often struggling to make ends meet on a regular basis, and then to have their income taken away, and then their childcare taken away. But then now we're slowly reopening the economy. What did they do with their children? So it sort of exacerbates the issues that they have come with. So Governor Hogan's announcement yesterday was encouraging for us in that as we have already begun to prepare for reopening. We have a lot of things that we need to consider, given that we are going to be needing to operate probably in a very different way. And does that mean reduced ratio in our classrooms? So does that mean we can't serve as many families? I'm sort of waiting for what that phase 2 looks like. It has a significant impact on our ability to transport our children. Many of our families use our transportation, and transportation looks totally different now. You can't fill a school bus anymore with 3 to 5 year olds. So we have to really consider when we do reopen, and we're glad that it seems to be on the horizon, what does that mean in terms of our families themselves?
Richard?
Sure. Well, I think, as you said, Leonardo, we're all in agreement that there is no recovery and there is no going back to work without licensed childcare providers being open. We decided, when this pandemic first began, I believe 9 or 10 weeks now, that we were not going to close our schools, that we were going to remain open and serve the families that needed our services. So so far it's working, I think, the way the governor wants it to work. In the beginning, it was just our capacity was reduced to half, and we were only permitted to care for families of essential employees. And that's what we did, and that was one of our first goals, to make sure that those essential families had quality childcare so they could go to work. And then as the governor put us into phase 1, then we definitely saw another wave of families coming to our schools. So right now we're at almost 95% of our reduced capacity, just serving the essential families and the phase 1 families. So our capacity, our group sizes have to increase. And I hope Tracy's right on the wink wink for next week, because these families are not going to be able to go back to work unless our capacities, our group sizes are able to increase. We're always communicating with our parents. They're eager to go back to work. They're eager to return, and their children are eager to return back into the classrooms. But it's going to be at a standstill, and I think the governor does understand if the capacity and group size doesn't increase in the next 2 weeks, families are going to have major issues of returning back to work.
I think you called on me. Is that right, Leonardo? Oh, okay, fantastic. I couldn't hear you for a second, so I want to make sure everybody can hear me.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I had it muted in 2 different places. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. I've done that before. Well, first and foremost, thank you so much for the opportunity for this forum and the opportunity to talk about this extremely important component of our economy, childcare. As you said, Community Action Council, we are the designated nonprofit organization in the county providing services to designated anti-poverty organization in the county providing services to low-income families. And in addition to provision of early childhood education services, we provide food, energy, and housing assistance to families. In our Head Start and Pre-K program, as Tracy said, we serve 322 students ages 3 to 5 at 4 different centers in Howard County. And it was a very challenging decision to close on March 13th. It was challenging from the perspective that we already know that children of low-income families are already at risk and are experiencing and will be facing a level of educational gap and disparity, given the fact that their families don't have the resources of more affluent families to provide educational and enrichment activities for them. So services that are provided by our early childhood education program are really a change maker for those children and their families. But we knew that we were making the right decision organizationally to make sure that as the businesses were closing down, the parents were there to provide care for their children, and that we had the health and safety of our staff and the children first and foremost in our thoughts and plans. We cannot wait for the schools to open and for the kiddos to come back into their classrooms. at the same time, there is a definite understanding that things will probably not go back to normal for a very long period of time. So what does the new school setting and educational delivery system is going to look like is going to depend a lot on what the state decides the capacity is going to be. Right now, the capacity, as Tracy said, is 10-1, which means that we will, we will be able to basically serve half the number of students that we were serving before. And it's, you can't have a conversation about opening the economy without looking at the early childhood education and childcare hand in hand. So if the capacity is going to be reduced by 50%, then what happens to those families who are the ones who are going to be working at the restaurants and working at the retail stores and opening up the malls, and the economic impact of their inability to go back to work if childcare cannot go back to having the regular ratio of 20-1. So those are all the challenges that we're going to have to overcome.
Thank you. And then lastly, Nette, your opinion on this.
Hi, thank you so much, Leonardo, for this forum. It is an extremely important one. The majority of my clients are low income or no income. They were on the brink of working, and childcare played a critical role in that. Our clients come from workforce programs from the county, and with those workforce programs, it allowed us to be able to bridge them to work through our child care program scholarships and partner with a lot of home-based providers within the county. The camp is, it's encouraging to hear the news about the camp from the governor yesterday. But of course, just like with the other panelists on here, without the increase in capacity, there will be not a successful reopening of our county unless childcare gets addressed and the numbers get increased in the home-based providers, as well as some of the centers and family case providers. So we are encouraged by that, but without the support, of the county and other resources, as far as for camp, the parents will not be able to go to work. They will just not be able to go to work because they will not have anywhere for their children to go, and that brings on another component of their health and safety with the COVID, are they going to be latchkey kids staying at home watching, So it's an additional element of stress that'll be put on the parent, and primarily these are single moms, single moms out there trying to make a way, and what other stresses might be there to providing just making a way for themselves and their families. So I am hopeful and encouraged that the governor will increase the capacity and other programs and will become available to make a way and a pathway for these parents to be able to go to work and sustain work.
And so that leads us to another question, and something, Nette, that you just touched on, and that certainly the governor mentioned in his announcement yesterday, and that is talking about summer camps. And so I'm going to ask all of you this question. Camps in and of itself in a, quote, normal environment for many families can be quite an undertaking. And I know even in my home, we sit and we start talking in February about where the kids are going for camp and so forth, and figuring out which weeks they'll be where and when we might be able to take off because it's either a vacation or a short week or what have you. And so that being said, if summer camps are facing the same restrictions as daycare centers in terms of capacity and so forth, then might we also end up seeing perhaps a spike in the cost of camps because of that whole supply and demand situation? And so maybe, Nette, we'll start with you and go backwards this time following yourself, it'll be Bita, then Richard, then Tracy. But that's one question I have about summer camps. Might we see a spike in cost?
Well, more than likely, you probably will be, but camps typically have been unaffordable, for families that are low to no income. And, if there are camps in certain organizations or community centers or whatever, there are waiting lists, and they look for people to scholarship, their children to attend these camps, or even if they're just, summer sports leagues where they can attend, these families cannot afford the simple basics of life, let alone pay for summer camp. So the affordability factor is there. And so without some assistance in some kind of way to help, the parents afford to send their kids to camp, there will be no camp for them. That's just the reality of it.
And following up on that, studies have shown that during the months of summer, when children of low-income families are more than likely staying home and don't have the privilege and opportunity to engage in enrichment programs and educational activities, there is a slide in their in all of the gains that they have made throughout their academic year, the 9 months that they've been in school. So as at Community Action Council in our early childhood education program, we have a full year program. There's a higher concentration of camp-like activities during the summer, but we also know that our families who are in the workforce need to work all year. Life doesn't change because the season has changed. Work, and they still need to depend on a safe and quality educational programming. And one thing that we have learned, like Nette said, is when there is a childcare subsidy in place that has attached to it a co-payment for the parent, and then all of a sudden we see a reduction in number of participants because there is just not an affordability factor there to contribute toward the cost of childcare. So we provide all of our services free of charge to the families, even though in some of our programming we have an opportunity to charge. We have made an intentional decision not to do so because we know that it goes hand in hand with lack of participation.
Richard?
I would say this. I would say so far the common thread throughout the entire panel has been increased capacity. In order for families to go back to work. One of our biggest fears is, the flip side of that is that regardless if capacity is raised or not, these families are going to go back to work. So our biggest fear, and I think Maryland has done such an amazing job on raising the quality of childcare in Maryland, that our biggest fear is that these parents are going to have to be forced to go to unlicensed childcare schools or unlicensed home daycares. And we've worked way too hard to prevent that. And if we're talking about children's social and emotional well-being and rules and regulations to make sure, as we do increase our capacity, that we are following the CDC rules, these unlicensed schools are going to be totally off the radar of making sure that these children are in a safe, nurturing environment, and that these schools and that people are following the CDC rules. So for us, it seems like a no-brainer that the capacity has to increase, just because that's what we do. We're licensed providers, and we're high quality, and we're accredited. Give us that opportunity to prove ourselves that we can do this. And the CDC rules that are in play right now, the process procedures that we've been following for the last 9 weeks, they are working. They are protecting our children and our teachers and our families. So we do not want these children being forced to go to unlicensed child care centers or home daycares, and we definitely don't want them going to other schools. I know that I think MSDE had announced last week that they had increased, the number of programs by 21,000, which I kind of found that to kind of be funny because, I have 5 children. So if, I can only imagine telling my child that you can't go back to your old school. Like you just have to go to a school that has availability for you. That's total nonsense in my personal opinion. These families want to go back to their original school. And I think, Bita, you were talking about this. This is kind of what made me think about it. They got to get back to their friends, their teachers, where they left off academically, to make sure that these children are making progress towards, being prepared to enter into kindergarten. So I just wanted to make sure that we all understand that it all comes back to raising capacity. The last thing we want is these families being forced to go into unlicensed providers, and for these children to be put in an environment that they didn't originate, that they're not comfortable with, the same friends, same teachers, and actually the schools that these families have chosen. We know that, choosing a place for your child is probably one of the most difficult decisions that parents make. And once they make that decision, it's like a big burden that's been lifted off their chest that, wow, I finally found somewhere that I feel really great about taking care of my child and educating my children. So to put them back through that process again, I think would be devastating, not only to the family, but also to our children.
Thank you, Richard. And we're going to certainly come back and talk about some of those things that you just touched on related to the mental health and the teachers and so forth and in just a moment. And for those of you that have, I see 2 questions in the Q&A, and certainly we're going to get to that in just a moment. We actually have some questions tied that I think will touch on the comments in the Q&A. So just know that I'm acknowledging the questions there and that we will certainly get to them in just a minute. Tracy, just anything quickly you'd like to add that maybe perhaps hasn't been covered just as it relates to, summer camps and capacity and so forth?
The one thing that struck me about the summer camp announcement yesterday was it was reduced group size with outdoor activities. To me, that struck me as, okay, well, we know what our summers look like here in Maryland. When I just started, my brain started spinning. Okay, what are the operational procedures we need to put in place if we're following the CDC guidelines and screening children, and it's thunderstorming outside on a July morning, and the domino effect of all of that operationally needs to be considered. It's great that we have the opportunity to have camps. At the same time, you have to operationalize that recommendation and make sure that there aren't any negative unintended consequences.
And I think that's a great segue into this question for Bita. One of the things that we talked about yesterday, and that I want you to share a little bit about today, really gets into some of the the compliance challenges that come about that I think many people oftentimes are unaware of. And you have, in your case, being a Head Start program, and because of the different funding streams, you end up having these multiple layers that don't always talk to each other. And so just kind of share a little bit about how these governing authorities sometimes impact your ability to open and serve the youth that you're trying to serve.
One of the things I love about Howard County is our sense of partnership and collaboration. And I wish that existed at a higher governmental arena as well, because it does really make life easy for people who are on the ground and trying to operationalize the mandates that are delivered from the governmental entities. As you said, Leonardo, in our Head Start program, in our early childhood education program in its totality is funded from federal by the federal and state government. And those two entities aren't always in alignment and in synergy in the manner in which they want very similar services to the same population delivered. So it's a challenge for us because right now we are in a position where we have funding from the federal government. We have very strong encouragement from them to open up and deliver services to our 3 and to 5-year-old students because they understand the ramifications of the at-risk group being out of this very structured educational environment, right? At the same time, we have the mandates of MSDE that is only providing at this point licensing to entities that are providing services to essential children of essential employees. So that doesn't allow us to open. And if we get that license, Head Start will not allow us to provide services to children of the essential employees if they weren't already in our Head Start program. So it is, you build capacity, but the doors still cannot be opened. So we are taking advantage of this time and everybody has good intentions and everybody wants to open at a time that is the right time where we are not going to, exasperate the spread of the pandemic. So, we are trying to use this opportunity to make sure that organizationally we are prepared, our staff is prepared, logistically our centers are ready, and that we're going to be able to be in compliance not only with HHS mandates and MSDE mandates, but also CDC. And we are working very closely with the Howard County Health Department, who's been a long-term, amazing partner to kind of guide us through assuring that all of our facilities are going to be open with first and foremost health and safety of our staff and children in mind. What's the challenge?
Thank you. And I think that, yeah, and that gives a good segue over to Richard. And so, you touched on it a little bit earlier in terms of following the CDC guidelines and things of that nature. And so with that, by trying to put all of these different practices in place, what does that do in terms of either impacting whether, again, it's cost or service delivery or what have you? Just kind of maybe talk a little bit about maybe some of these impacts in terms of adhering to some of these directives. And I'm going to also mention two of the questions from the Q&A because I think they're related to that overall question, and that is getting into one, what's being done as you follow these directives from the CDC in terms of being able to provide, I guess, or maybe how does that provide some type of assurance for parents that their children are in a safe environment, that they won't be exposed to the best that you can, exposed to this virus and so forth. So if you could kind of talk a little bit about the CDC guidance, how that's impacting your ability to serve and provide some assurance for families.
I think the impact that it's had, that it has brought confidence to our families that it's okay for their children to return. We've seen over 500 children over the last 4 weeks return back into care. So, even though we were only allowed to still serve the essential families, whether you were essential or not, I think there was still an overall concern with their children and the safety of their children, or the health of their children. And I think as we've put these CDC processes into play, it has definitely gained confidence with our parents as an organization that we are following the recommendations of the CDC. Whether the recommendations are right or wrong, who am I to determine that? But I think what our parents are seeing is that we are an organization that takes this very seriously, and we are doing every recommendation. We're following through with every recommendation that the CDC has recommended, from the kiss and go in the lobby, where parents they're not allowed to enter past our security doors, taking temperature checks of our teachers, our parents, asking a series of health questions, which are all CDC recommendations. So to answer your question, Leonardo, it's been just building confidence that it's okay and safe to return.
And with that, this next question is for Nette. And so we were talking about, certainly I think as people that are watching, they're seeing that certainly childcare is having an impact on children across the entire income spectrum. And particularly in I would say maybe in some of the families that you work with, we're seeing even bigger impact and more. And I think just recently, I think there was an announcement that as of June 7th, the state's going to change how it provides funding for some of the different centers as relates to essential workers and so forth. How does that also, further, for lack of a better way of saying it, throw a monkey wrench into things by different providers not having this level of support? And what does that also do as we talk about early childhood education?
Well, this is already impacting both workers and child care providers at an elevated rate, on top of what has already been challenging in the child care spectrum on a national basis. The child care system was already in a crisis before COVID, and you cannot have a successful opening without the existence of home-based child care. It just cannot happen. The majority of home-based child care mostly supports our lower income and hourly wage workers. And they are located in all four corners of our county, which is good because it helps, where the workers work in all different areas, the access it makes it accessible for them. Prior to the state closures of daycare, some providers had already had to close temporarily or even some permanently because they lost enrollment due to the stay-at-home mandates. Child care providers already operate on razor-thin margins. I mean, extremely razor-thin margins, especially home-based providers. And to the extent that the closures have left them to the brink of collapse. Our country as a whole is on track to lose about a third of child care capacity. As of today, I received some data from MSDE, where Howard County is only at a 68.4% child care that is open, which is greatly reduced capacity for our county. As a result of the state not paying after June 7th, many workers will not be able to return to work without this assistance, and providers will not be able to open their doors due to the lack of financial dollars to get to their center, to get their centers ready to open. They need sanitizers, they need masks, they need financial support, they need a helping hand. And they need to hire staff because a lot of their staff they had to let go because of the lack of enrollment. They are suffering. Some are trying to maintain their doors open to provide a service for the community. Some home-based centers or some centers itself has been there for over decades, but with the consistent changes to child care regulations, the cost of losing families because of high tuition costs, in order to provide quality care, quality education, as well as maintain quality teachers. These new requirements by the CDC, are due to the virus. I see closings in a matter of months. The cost alone to maintain buildings and classroom demands from both at a licensing standpoint Payroll and classroom supplies will cause the providers to bottom out. They're trying to maintain the families with what they have by offering discounts. And to them, once the essential personnel pay is over in June, some will not have discounts and will not be able to afford. And honestly, it's going to stretch the providers and businesses to the extreme. So it is my hope that, there will be some help coming to these providers, centers, family centers, but especially to home-based centers, because they primarily are the ones where these lower income and lower wage workers are able to get to, and they're all over the county.
Thank you, Nette. And I think that, certainly even, I guess, gets us into another area as we talk about that of even the mental health of the workers themselves. And so, Richard, I know this is something you've been paying, I think, particularly close attention to. And so certainly we're talking about, right now, we've talked a lot about the fiscal side of childcare and certainly the operation of the centers and so forth. But, the other part of this is also that of the teachers, the workers, as well as also even the children. And so, with over 20 centers in the, greater Baltimore area and even into Delaware, how are you preparing also for the return of your employees and any anxieties that they have, and even being able to notice different things related to children as well? And then I have another question I'm going to ask you just specifically from the Q&A that was addressed specifically for Celebree. So if you could take on that one first, though.
Sure. I think it's, it's communication. I think we're constantly keeping our teachers in the loop of what's going on, the progress that's being made. As I mentioned, we've had over 500 children return back into our programs, and with that, we've returned over the last 4 weeks. We've returned 57 teachers back into the program. I think out of all that, I think we've had maybe 6 teachers just basically said, I'm not ready to return for whatever reason, whether they're just personally not ready, or they may be, living with their mom and dad or taking care of their grandmom, somebody that has an underlying medical condition, and they're just not ready to return. But so far, we've been able to have 57 teachers return back into the Celebree classrooms. So we're pleased with the progress that's being made. And again, we're gonna beat this until somebody listens. It all comes back to the capacity again. I think, as Anita said, is that, the one thing, if you think about when this June 7th money ends and we're still at reduced capacity, that's a formula for disaster. So I think in my head, the governor has to at least give us 2 weeks to ramp our capacity back up. So when those fundings go away, that we could continue. And I hope that from a business standpoint, he's viewing it that way. And then you also have, for some of us, a lot of business owners, that the PPP money is also ending here shortly. So you can't continue to not have businesses not open as the resources start to come to a close.
And Richard, on that note, speaking of capacity, so knowing that, you can only handle however many the state allows you to handle. So then I guess ultimately what happens, I guess, to those that you either can't care for. I mean, if you said you have about 500 children in, but let's just say if you're at 1,000, what happens to the 500? Did that other 500, do they just ultimately go elsewhere? Do you have to end up trying to pick and choose who comes in? I mean, that's, what happens there?
As I mentioned, as of today, we are at 95% capacity. We're already seeing on June 8th, we could bring in an additional 400 children. So that is not, we're talking real issues here, guys. I mean, these are families that have say, I will return on June 8th if I'm able to return and if the governor is allowing us to increase our capacity. And that's just what, and that's just in 2 weeks. I mean, we have an issue today. So we already see what the horizon already looks like, and it's real. So I keep wanting to go back to Tracy's wink, wink. I hope the wink, wink is real. But I do think the governor does understand the situation that's at hand right now. So to answer your question, Leonardo, I hope we're not, there is no position to be in where we have to pick and choose, because there is no picking and choosing. I mean, at this point, we are bumping up against a real capacity issue.
Yeah, and I think that transitions back over to Tracy and Bita. And so, we talked about some of the things that's also being done that Richard mentioned as relates to maybe the emotional psyche of the teacher, but let's also talk about the children and as well. And so what perhaps are, you guys trying to do to be able even to handle even some of the emotional needs of the children who may come in with some, their own set of anxieties based upon maybe what they've seen their parents go through or what they've heard their parents say. So because that's another element of also that's in with this COVID-19.
So I'll start. Social emotional learning is the foundation of early childhood education. And while all of us here, our goal is to get our early childhood friends kindergarten ready, you have to have a strong approach to them and helping them learn social and emotional skills, understanding themselves and their friends and their families and their community. That's a challenge on a good day. And so what's occurred now and what we're really, really burdened by, as everyone is that, they're isolated. Our children have been isolated now for approaching 3 months. And many of our children, as Bita talked about, were at risk to begin with. So when they come back to us, we're recognizing that before we can start, talking about literacy and math skills, even though for us, our children have been participating in online learning this entire time, it's going to be as if they have never been in school before, because you have to address that need. And we know from neuroscience that without addressing the emotions, the learning of content cannot occur. So already approaching that reopening with addressing those social emotional needs, the routines, the predictability. Children thrive in predictability, and this has been totally unpredictable. They often will fill in the blanks because they don't know what is happening next. So we as adults have ways to cope with this. Some of us, it's harder than others, but children, they don't have the vocabulary to say, I'm scared and I don't understand why my parents are packing my things because we have to go live with grandma because we lost our house, or mom is crying because she lost her job. They fill in the blanks. And because of where they are developmentally, oftentimes they internalize that. So as a program and as early childhood educators, we need to address that first and address that through that strong adult in the classroom, those adults in the classroom, those caregivers, in recognizing that our children are going to come to us different than they were when they left us on March 13th. And that if we, when and not if, when we are able to address that, then we can look at, okay, this will increase our outcomes and improve our outcomes. But without addressing that first, that second piece can't be there. I do know, I talked to some colleagues this weekend. I said, we need to stop doing state testing for like 4 years, because I think we've just totally jacked up our entire trajectory for these children and even all the way through K-12, because you have a learning loss that has never been seen before. So I think social emotional has to be our number one priority when we are able to be with our friends again.
Wow.
And just to follow up on that, I mean, this pandemic has been traumatic for everybody. And in a sense, it's also has had a bifurcated impact. For some people, it's I'm working from home, I'm teleworking, it's nice out, I can take the dog out for a walk, I can go for a run. And for others, it has translated to loss of employment, loss of sense of security about their stability in their home, a sense of security about what the future is going to be like. And that level of stress and anxiety gets mirrored by their children, who already are living in challenging circumstances and have already seen so much that a 3 and 4 and 5-year-old should not be exposed to. So in our program on an ongoing basis, we provide mental health therapy, speech and language therapy, coaching for the teaching staff to be able to identify these challenges and address them in the classroom as far as classroom management is concerned. And we have a behavioral specialist who works with these teachers and the students and the parents. And all of a sudden, there's a void. And the parent who was challenged before is managing so many different layers of stressors. So the issue of giving support, it really has to be in a 2-generational perspective. We need to support the children, but neither party is going to succeed without the other thriving. So our organizational and national really challenge is going to be, how do we put our arms around these families and help them heal in a way that allows them to continue to thrive and become self-sufficient. And it's not, things aren't going to go back to normal anytime soon. So how do we change and evolve to be responsive to the current situation?
Thank you. So we've got a question in the Q&A, and this is for Richard. And this gets back into that capacity scenario. And the question states, whether or not Celebree has plans to accommodate families if capacity is not increased, and specifically they use the example, A days or B days and so forth. So that way maybe again you're able to serve those 1,000 families, but you still only have 500 slots, but maybe half the kids are coming 3 days a week, 1 week, and the other kids are going 2 days, and then the next week it flips. But any thoughts on that?
Or on rotating families, is that
right?
Is that the question?
That was kind of, and I think they're trying to ask the question again, getting back to capacity. I think certainly I would say what I'm seeing from this question, and again, it speaks to the heart of what we've talked about for the last 50 plus minutes, is that you've got parents that know they have to go back to work and are trying to figure out what to do with their child or children. And if there's a capacity issue, is it a case where the same way we're talking about for schools and K through 12, on them having certain days where they may go to school and be in the classroom Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but Tuesday, Thursday, they're at home, and another set of kids are going on those two. Are there any conversations around that from a daycare perspective?
Celebree schools are there to service our parents, right? So I can't predict that. I cannot say, family, you can only go to work on Tuesdays and Thursdays because the Smith family have to go to work. Like we don't operate that way. I think that what we can do, what we can do as a community, is continue to stress our voices of how important this is to our governor. I know, I think as Tracy said, I think we were a little disappointed in yesterday's announcement without the wink, and that's the last time I'm going to say that, Tracy. But we were hoping that he was going to address this issue that we see. So we Celebree and the Maryland State Childcare Association is lobbying very hard to make sure that our message is being heard, and I do believe the governor is aware of the situation. So I don't really know how to answer that question, to be honest with you. There's an issue, there's a major issue here in front of us, And I'm hopeful that this will resolve itself in the next week or two.
Yeah. And so with that, we're going to prepare to wrap up. And I've got one closing question I'll ask for all of you. But prior to that, just one quick comment, I guess, that I'll make. And that's where I think, again, for those that are watching this live or those that may watch it later on demand on the YouTube channel. And that is, I think, for employers and managers, I think if nothing else, there's going to have to be some continued level of understanding over the next several months that even in instances where you want that worker to be physically in front of you, maybe at the office or what have you, that in some instances, they're going to have to be some leeway that they may have to work again from home if they have the ability to do so, simply because we can see right now that capacity is going to be an issue. And so that's just my little quick, I guess, 60-second soapbox speech. But as we prepare to wrap up, and I forgot who said this earlier, but certainly, there have been a number of childcare concerns and issues that's been discussed nationally and even in Maryland for a while. And so COVID-19 has unmasked many issues surrounding childcare and early childhood education. So again, as we close, I would say for the panel, what perhaps are maybe the one or two issues that you hoped will either get addressed or that at least will have more attention focused on it in the days ahead? And so maybe I've started with Nette before and Tracy before. I'm going to start with Richard, and then from there go to Nette, and then to Tracy, and wrap up with Bita. So Richard, what might just be one or two early childhood concerns that you hope that, through this whole COVID-19 experience will be brought to the forefront just from your vantage point?
I think the number one, Leonardo, is the fact that how essential our business is, how essential childcare is to the overall economy. Without high quality childcare and enough programs available for working families, it definitely creates a strain on anybody that's trying to get into the workforce or stay in the workforce. I think, I think prior to COVID, I think it was a 3-to-1, 3 children for every 1 program. And there's studies that are showing right now that after this, it's going to be 7-to-1. So I think that I think that's already rearing its head of a major issue.
Thank you. Nette?
Access to affordable childcare. Access to affordable childcare and support to home-based childcare providers. They really need that support in order to increase their levels in their early education for the children that they see that are from families that are low income, that are living in poverty. So I like to see more support for home-based childcare centers and affordable childcare, because these workers that are going to these home-based childcare, these are the same workers that are providing us the means to live the way we live. They're your cashiers, they are your warehouse workers. Those are the ones who help bring these boxes to your doors. And so without some more emphasis and recognition on these home-based childcare providers, we're just not going to see the level of success that we are aiming to achieve.
Thank you. Tracy, then Bita.
I think what this has shined a great light on is not just how foundational and fundamental early childhood education is to our economy, but at the national level, when we want to move outcomes for children and for our economy in general and prepare college and career ready children to go into college and go into the workforce, it starts here. It starts here, and you have to put attention here because this is the foundation of what makes those people grow up and become contributing members to society.
And Bita.
I think more than ever, this pandemic has really shined a light on the reality of life experiences through the lens of poverty. And it's put the spotlight on how much we need to support the families and parents in order to make sure that their children succeed. So classrooms and education is not just going to happen at a center. It has to be a hybrid approach, and it has to be a two-generational approach. We have to provide support to our parents who are not knowing where their next meal is going to come from, or whether they're going to have a roof over their head, or they are living with the fear of potentially having their electricity cut off. With all those services, so they can step back, have a sigh of relief, and then focus on supporting their children thrive. And without those two going hand in hand, we really are not going to have a full privilege of success. One complements the other. And that is exactly the Head Start approach. And I think, in this county, we've done a really good job talking about the fact that there are 10,000 students in our public school system who are on free and reduced meals. But we also have to step back and say those 10,000 students have families at home who are going hungry as well, who have needs as well. So supporting human service organizations that lend support to those families and the children, I think is something that we would continue to advocate for. And I think the other thing that has come out of this pandemic is shining the light of the heroes of our countries, who are the teachers, and the incredible work that they do day after day. We need to hold them up, we need to support them, we need to compensate them more, and we need to give them all the support that they need, because they do have a significant impact on the lives of our children and our nation as a whole.
Thank you. And with that, I want to again thank our panelists for participating today, and thank all of our panelists on this 5-part series. Thank you for tuning in. And again, I wish you much success and safety. And again, we'll be back with future topics as it relates to opening up in the future, and actually take a break and come back in a couple of hours, and we'll be bringing to you Screen to Table with Hudson Coastal. And we'll talk about all there is to shuck oysters and everything else from a seafood standpoint. So again, thank you again, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you so much.